Hello there, everyone. Here we have today Onome Ako joining us at Empowering Women in Health. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. So we'll just start with a series of questions. The first one, we want to know a little bit more about your story. So, what did you want to do when you were younger? So, just starting your educational career, and how did you go from that to who you are today?
That's an interesting question. To what my much younger self, I actually wanted to be a geologist because my dad is a geologist, and he used to go out there and do a lot of field work and bring back rocks. So I used to collect rocks as a kid, and then it became very apparent that I couldn't do that because I'm not much of a I'm more of an artsy type of person, and I did not like mathematics, and I kind of needed that to move ahead. So um, I then wanted to be a journalist. Um, I did a lot of writing growing up as well, and in I think it was in '86, one of the famous journalists that we had in Nigeria at the time was killed by a letter bomb, and that kind of scared my mom, and she was like, oh geez, that could be a bit of a unsafe career path. And I didn't change my mind because of that in any way. But what 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 triggered my venture into international development is the fact that I just had a friend who was an exchange student from Niger Republic. He spoke French, and I really got interested in learning French, and then that got my brain thinking about careers that I could do with having two languages, with being bilingual, and it just went from there. So I didn't start off with this plan of, geez, I want to save the world, or I want to, go into this career. So that was my path really, and I think I really set my mind on doing it because along the line, I got different opportunities in the private sector, and I refused to go that route because I really did begin to enjoy the thought around moving into international development. So that's it really.
That's such an interesting, what is it, turn of things, and just like going from this and that. And then when you said journalist, I was like, oh my gosh, wow, like I'm sure my dad would probably want me to be a journalist today because he's a journalist as well. But another part, that's a story for another day.
Yeah.
Okay. So, next, but to our next question. I mean, we can't deny the color of your skin. It's black, beautiful out there. So our question would be, over the years, have you encountered any barrier to your success or growth as a Black female leader?
Absolutely. So I will say, two things really. We're kind of the visible minority. But I think one thing that I've struggled with in my career is not being visible, and not being heard. And these two things actually go hand in hand. So I'll give you an example. So, I remember, and early in my career, being in meetings, working in organizations, and being in meetings and having something to say, having the knowledge, and I know that I have the knowledge, um, and someone else sees the same thing, you know, another gender, another race, and heads nod, and people acknowledge what is being said. And I started questioning myself about what I knew, and if I knew what I thought I knew, because I felt invisible and I felt unheard, in the workplace and in the work setting. And I started to internalize some of this as well. And I think one thing I will say to people is that have this experience is trying as much as possible to stay true to what you know, and push the boundaries, and continue to ask questions, and continue to insist in ways you can on being heard. Because once you start to internalize, you start to lose self-confidence, you start to self-doubt, and then you don't speak up. And when you don't speak up, then we know what that does to your career, because you're not seen as leading charge, because you're seen as this person who really doesn't have an opinion, who isn't moving things through, and you kind of you become the worker bee, so to speak. So I think that was one of the main challenges that I faced. I think another challenge that I faced in organizations that I worked in is also the piece around pay equity. Being paid differently from your male counterparts, who is white, and knowing that you're both on the same level. So I faced that as well, but I don't think it was intentional. I think it was, again, the unconscious bias around, a male probably having to earn more, being better in the exact same role. So I challenged it and went to HR, went to my manager, who, again, it wasn't, I don't think it was intentional. And he fought that for me. So I'll say that those are some of my experiences that, I've had along the journey of being a female leader.
I love how you went from being not heard and now seeing where you are today, executive director, is just amazing. And the fact that you stood up and you fought for what you wanted, I think that's very inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Talking about the bias in gender pay, I was recently reading a book called Invisible Women. I don't know if you guys have read it. By Carolyn Criado Perez. Love the book. It talks about the data bias of the world that's like designed for like more males, and that they don't do it on purpose, like you said. It's more like the way things are constructed. If anyone's like watching this, read that book if you can. And that kind of leads a little bit into the next question that we wanted to ask. With these difficulties along the way, what role did like mentors or peers play, and what are some of the traits of fellow Black female leaders or female leaders that you admire?
I think one piece of advice that I have for young professionals is always find your mentors. You need to find your mentors. You need to find your sponsors. And early on in my career, I had some really amazing, women and men, Black or white, that I actually connected with and supported me and supported my vision, and I brainstormed with and advised me in terms of my career move. And I still have those mentors till date, right? So it's something that I will say has played a significant role in some of my career choices and my trajectory into being where I am today. So even the decision to apply for role of executive director was something that I spoke at length to with my mentor, and talked here and there, and because I had several opportunities at that time, and I needed to choose a path, so to speak. So incredibly important. And people talk about also individuals having their own personal board of directors, right? So I think that that's another thing that I feel is significant. And I don't have a full board of directors, but again, I have people that I call on through my career. So I will say definitely it plays a significant role. The second question you asked about, having female leaders is one that is interesting, and I could go on and mention a lot of female leaders, those that I know personally and those that I do not know personally. But I'll want to kind of turn that on its head and say majority of African women are actually leaders in their own rights. They're mothers, they're, a lot are probably, I'll say, let's use an example of a woman that has moved from Nigeria here and, has a PhD, has 3 kids, is trying to break into the job market and just goes out there and, does care work and, just anything to put food on the table and continue to push through and persevere. I think for me, those are like significant role models even for me. I look at my mom as well and the role that she's played. Being a caregiver, when we're much younger, but just the force that she had behind her and the resilience she had as a woman. So I'll say that I'm not going to pinpoint one specific person, but it's just a range of women that I have around me, be it my mom, friends, that continue to pursue knowledge, immigrant women, a range of women that I kind of suck or drink from, if I might use that term.
I love the way you phrase that because it kind of like shows that leadership is not just, a label that is like one size fits all. It's also about like almost an attitude, and it's about us like labeling ourselves as leaders and our fellow women as leaders. That's going to, elevate us all. So I really liked how you phrased that. Thank you.
Like, I think it's important to have examples and just like people like that around you, because it really pushes you, right? And even like at times when you probably want to just give up and you feel like, oh, the system is just against you and there is no way you can make it or whatever, when you just see those people, you're like, you know what, they can do it and I can do it as well. And that keeps you pushing, right? And it's like the strength, like you said, you're drawing strength from them as well, right? And that keeps you going. And they cheer you on, even when there's like, even when the system or the parents are not like, the environment is not so welcoming. So I'm great. I'm really happy.
Absolutely. And some of these women that I talk about, some of them are still struggling, right? Even within the system, some of them have not necessarily even broken through, but you can just see the resilience that they put through. I think the last thing I'll just kind of mention again, drawing from that point that you made for me is the fact that when we look at women leaders as well, so for me, and being midway into my career, you tend to look at, who has achieved more, and you're kind of looking up to that person. But again, flipping that again and saying, well, who is upcoming, who is young, who because it's very necessary to continue to draw from strength of younger people and saying, okay, what's different, what's going on, and then flipping that as well and saying, okay, who is a young person? So I always love to have young people around me as well that can help me think differently and push the boundaries as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And now, this question, I don't know why. I'm just like, I really love this question, but what is it? It's, in what way can emerging Black female leaders break barrier in their career, knowing that how with the, I guess, microaggression that we have to face, even if it might not be like just outrightly in your face, right? Just like dealing with the microaggression. So how would they be able to like, how can they break those barriers in their career?
I will say around that is, it's very easy to kind of look around us as well and kind of think about all those things that are, working against, female, Black, or racialized women. And I will want to say, let's kind of find ways to actually start with ourselves as well, right? What are some of those assumptions and biases that we have, right? So for the longest time, I struggled, and being very sincere now, I struggled with, everyone around me was like, oh, a female leader. And I struggled with actually seeing myself as a female leader, right? So I think that a lot of work needs to actually start within, to recognize yourself as, this is who I am. And you don't need to be leading an organization before you're a leader. So you're a leader in different ways, and kind of internalize that and start working towards that. So I'll say that that's one thing. I think the second thing for me is just being authentic and being able to speak up. in every situation. And I give the example of speaking in meetings and not being heard, but you kind of have to be bold. And so it's that boldness. You have to be bold and continue to stand against the grain, if I might say, and just continue to push the boundaries and find ways that you're heard. And it doesn't have to be loud, but it can be very, very persistent. And the boldness, the persistence, the authenticity, I think will start to move the needle.
Great answer. And I like how you had like just the two different dimensions. You're just looking inward, but also like speaking up for yourself as well, because that's where it starts, right? Just when you just like that inner power type of thing, and just like knowing that, okay, I am confident, and maybe just like seeing yourself in a way that you know that this is who I am. And although the system is working against me and telling me I can't be this, I have to fight against it. And even we had a conversation with somebody today, and just talking about how our existence is resistant, and we just gotta keep pushing and just doing our best. And yeah, thank you so much for that answer.
Like for a lot of people, the like pushing and continuing to go forward is like a bit hard. Sometimes like you lose motivation or you're not sure how to continue. So, in what ways would you say for people listening to this that are kind of stuck in that situation, how would you say that they should like move forward even if other people are telling them their ideas or their personal goals are impossible?
I mentioned the term perseverance, right? Previously, I think it's when you know that you continue to persevere. And I'll give you a very quick example. And this it actually happened back in my home country of Nigeria. And I remember when I was going to do my master's in not-for-profits and social policy at London School of Economics, and I couldn't afford to do it. And there was a scholarship board, went to the person in charge, spoke to her. I knew that I qualified in every way. And I made the case, and I was told, just go there and just make the case of why you should be considered for the scholarship. And I had my pitch. I went there, I made my case. And in response, she just looked at me and said, I don't know what you're talking about. You're not looking to be a lawyer, to be a doctor, not for profits. Why do we need that here? And basically, I got shut down. I was a few weeks to going to London to start school. And so what did I do? I went all the same. It didn't change things. It didn't question my validity of what I was going to study and the fact that I felt that it was useful. I rallied my troop around. I rallied my family around me. I rallied people that were going to support me, that actually believed in what I was going to do, right? So it's really, again, knowing what your North Star is and your persistence in pursuing it, but also being aware of your surroundings and your environment, and when you need to make tweaks here and there, you make them, but also knowing that there are also people around. So if person A doesn't buy that vision, don't worry about it, person B could, right? And again, it also goes back to the internal. What is internal? And always rechecking to make sure that you're solid, right? What are the assumptions? You're solid, so you keep going back to yourself as well. So I hope that helps.
Just thinking back to when you said drawing from women around you as well, I think it could also help to keep you going at times when you want to just, like, I don't know, you feel like, oh, you can't go on any further. So, and knowing your why, I hear people always saying that, like, what's your why? Because when you know your why, then you're able to, you have the vision in mind, and you know that even though my present situation might not look at it right now, but I have a vision, I know where I'm going, and I just have to keep on pushing till I achieve whatever I need to achieve. And which brings me to my next question. So what would you consider to be your biggest professional achievement till date?
So, biggest professional achievement, let me give you two instances, and I think it will help capture it. So I was giving a talk in Ottawa in last February, right before COVID-19, hit, and we became confined to our homes, and someone came down and waited to speak to me after the event. And she said, I saw your name. I saw you were African. I saw you were a female. And I just came to show you solidarity, right? One. The second example was with the organization that I worked with. I worked with World Vision previously. I worked there for 7 years. And one day I just went to have, going back to your old stomping ground, and went to have lunch with one of my friends. And I was in the role of executive director at this time in Amref. And, she came and she said, oh, wow, that one of her colleagues, who, I didn't know because I had left before she started, couldn't believe that I worked at World Vision before, and the fact that I had moved on and I had become executive director at Amref Health Africa. And geez, if I could do it, then she can do it. And for me, I think that those two examples actually are the fact that I can be an inspiration, and not said in the funny way. And that's why I gave you those examples, for other people to think, wow, there's a space for, Black, women to lead. That is my, greatest professional achievement. So my role as executive director of Amref Health Africa, and recently as chair of the board of CanWatch, which was announced last week, are just conduits to showing that there's the space for Black female leaders, and those roles are helping show that. So I'll say that will be my greatest professional achievement. And I think what COVID-19 has taught me as well, being home, having, working from home now, is being able to also, I'm working at home. My daughter is seeing me working at home. She's gradually beginning to talk like me, and do pretend meetings. But I think for me as well is providing the space for my 5-year-old to know that she can be who she wants to be by seeing her mom in that space as well. I think it's really significant for me.
Sorry to cut, but I think that's why representation is so important, because I keep mentioning this because they really just open up your mind to just that possibility that, okay, this could be me one day. And I never really realized how important it was until maybe when I was just like, oh my gosh, there's so many barriers, and just even trying to change your name on a resume to make it look white sounding, so you can at least get your foot to just get interviewed and all of that, right? But when you just see somebody that, okay, wow, you are also an immigrant and you are here today, that means if she can do it, maybe I can do it as well, right? And then that gives you hope and fires you up, and you know what? I have to keep fighting. I have to keep going, right? And sometimes you don't even see yourself. You don't even see yourself in that role until you see somebody and you're like, you know what? Maybe I can do it as well, because you never considered that before, because it was never a possibility in your mind. So thank you so much for sharing that.
I was going to add that it's not just the representation that matters, but also in your work, you're doing a lot of interesting thing for women's health. So especially right now as executive director at Amref Health Africa in Canada, and throughout your whole career, really, you've learned a lot about women and children's health. So I guess we wanted to ask, what are some of the interesting findings that you've come across relating to women's health and Black women's health, and what impact do you think that will have on their condition in Canada?
Amref Health Africa is an African led health not-for-profits, kind of the largest international health organization. And the work that we do is really focused on the continent in Africa. And we have a focus on the health of women and children. But in thinking about this, I just wanted to, again, because your question is really centered around the health of women and children in Canada. And let me talk a little bit about that. So I think as you have globally, women are underrepresented, right, in decision making. So globally, women account for 70% of the health workforce, but they account for 25% of leadership positions. And I'll tell you where I'm coming to here. So the positions, the 70% is normally, the nurses and on the lower cadre of the health system, so nurses below. Probably that didn't come out right, but they're just normally on the lower, cadre of workers and not necessarily the decision makers. But at the same time, women face unquestionable health disparities, and they also face very poor health outcomes due to marginalization and social exclusion, right? And we know that systemic or structural, racism or inequalities impact, the physical, mental, emotional health of Black women. We're overrepresented when you're talking about, lupus, heart disease, and so on. Take COVID-19 as well as example. Women are at the front line of health workers. We're the ones that are working in the stores and, making sure that you're providing services and all of that. But there's also very limited data around, the women or racialized health for women or for Black communities. And if you don't have the data, how are you able to come up with solutions if you don't have research data? If you do not have women at the table in policy making, how are you able to come out with solutions for women and children as well, right? So you have to ensure that there's representation around the table by women to actually move these conversations forward, right? So more than ever, urgent sustained action is needed to tackle, right, those barriers, to challenge the system, but you need those that are affected by the system to speak up and to be at the table. But you only have 25% representation globally, right? I didn't look into the Canadian numbers. So I think that success around, putting the agenda of women's health, Black women's health, on the agenda is extremely success. You will have success when you have women as partners as well.
We agree 100% with everything you've done. And I think that's exactly what our new organization is about. In Canada, the numbers are completely similar. I think it's a little 80% health workers, still under 25% leaders. And there's really, like you said, there's no data to say how much that is in each sector. So it's important to have conversations like the ones we're having right now so that we can bring the problems forward and then start making solutions based on those problems. So absolutely.
Next question is, what advice do you have for a student now wanting to pursue a similar career path? Or what advice would you give your younger self? I really like that question. You can go ahead.
What advice will I give my younger self? I think I said it previously, and in kind of the story I shared with you about the experience with when I was going to go for my master's, and the fact that this dream that I had and what I wanted to do, and it was trampled upon, so to speak. And I would say, find your why, find your North Star, and stick to it, right? Number one. But at the same time, refine it as necessary when needed. I think that the most used term since COVID-19, or the most used word besides unmute yourself, is pivot, right? Everyone is talking about, pivoting and pivoting. So what I'll say is, look within your context as well and be conscious of, so you have this goal, you have this North Star, but you look within your context and the changes that are going on in your environment, and make sure that as you go on your journey, right, you're kind of making whatever changes that are needed. So that's main one. And on that journey, on that trajectory, going to the North Star and making the changes that are required and making adjustments here and there, find key people, kind of your mentors and your board of directors, your family members that will support that process and that journey, right? We talked about mentors. I have my family. I have an extremely supportive family that is helping me be here. If not, I wouldn't even be doing what I'm doing. And then the last thing I will say is, seek out opportunities, right? But also seize the opportunities when they come, because there's certain opportunities that you do not necessarily have on your trajectory. And I'll give an example of being board member of CanWatch or being chair of the board. It was an opportunity that came. It came to me, and I thought, there's very limited representation of female, Black women on well, female is women, but of Black women on boards. There's an opportunity to be the board chair. Now, if I don't seize an opportunity like that, right, then who am I to speak up and say that we don't have representation if I'm not seizing those opportunities? So the advice I will have is, as well, seek out those opportunities and seize them.
So much for that. And I think that's something that everyone like listening to this will be able to take with them in their future careers and leadership opportunities, to just take those opportunities because that's how you like have your voice be heard basically in this world. So thank you so much for being with us today, for taking the time to share your experiences and connect with us. It's been really an honor today.
You're very welcome. And thank you so much for having me. And yeah, thank you.